Modern builders need steel, concrete, and blueprints. Medieval builders had none of that, and yet their structures are still standing. How? Not by chance. There were tricks so precise, so effective, we still can't fully replicate them. Some of what they did defies everything we think we know about construction. So, how did they pull it off? Let's start with one of the simplest and most baffling methods they used to build walls that still haven't crumbled after centuries. Dry stone walls are exactly what they sound like. Walls built from stones without using any mortar, cement, or glue to hold them together. Just rocks, stacked on rocks. It's like playing the world's most permanent game of Jenga, except if you mess up, your sheep escapes. These walls have been standing for over 1,000 years. While modern buildings crack and crumble after a few decades, these ancient stone stacks laugh in the face of time. The secret isn't in what they added, it's in what they left out. Medieval builders became masters at reading stones like books. They knew which rocks would sit perfectly on top of others. Each stone was carefully chosen and placed so that its weight pressed down on the stones below, creating a natural lock system that worked better than artificial adhesive. The gaps between stones weren't mistakes. They were genius. Water could flow through instead of freezing and expanding to crack the wall apart. Like medieval drainage that actually works, unlike your basement. These walls flex and move with the ground instead of fighting it, adjusting to seasonal changes. Speaking of things that bend without breaking, medieval timber framing created buildings that moved like dancers instead of standing rigid like soldiers. These structures used mortise and tenon joints, basically wooden puzzle pieces that fit together perfectly and were locked in place with wooden pegs. It's like the building was doing yoga, while modern structures just stand there being stubborn until they snap. Master carpenters seasoned their timber for years before use. They understood that green wood would shrink and warp, so they let it dry completely first. Then they cut precise joints that would actually get tighter over time as the wood continued to dry and the wooden pegs swelled with moisture. The entire frame was often assembled on the ground first, like a giant three-dimensional puzzle. Then the whole community would gather for a barn raising to lift the frame sections into place. These events became celebrations where work and socializing happened together. These flexible frames could handle earthquakes that would topple rigid stone buildings. Talk about flat-pack furniture that actually worked. The joinery was so precise that frames could be disassembled and moved to new locations. But while these frames provided the skeleton, the roof needed something special. Thatched roofs were made from water reed, straw, or heather. Basically whatever long, flexible plants grew nearby. This wasn't just slapping some grass on top of your house. Thatching was serious engineering disguised as farm work that required years of training. The secret was thickness. These roofs were often 2 feet thick or more. That's enough insulation to make a polar bear jealous. All that plant material trapped air, creating a natural barrier that kept homes cool in summer and warm in winter without artificial heating or cooling. The roof was built at a steep angle, usually between 45 and 60 degrees. Rain would hit the thick thatch and run off immediately. The steep pitch meant water never had time to pool or find its way through to the interior, even during storms. Thatchers worked from bottom to top, each new layer overlapping like scales on a fish. A properly built thatched roof could last 50 years with basic maintenance. Compare that to modern asphalt shingles that need replacing every 15 to 20 years. But what good is a weatherproof roof if you can't see anything inside? Before glass became common, medieval builders got creative with animal bladders for windows. Yes, pig and cow bladders. It sounds gross until you realize it was actually brilliant. This wasn't desperation, it was practical engineering using available materials that worked surprisingly well. Fresh bladders were thoroughly washed, then stretched and dried until they became translucent. These bladder windows let light through while keeping wind, rain, and snow outside. They were treated with oil or wax to make them more flexible and weather-resistant. For poor families, this was the difference between living in a dark cave or having actual daylight indoors. Glass was incredibly expensive and difficult to transport without breaking. Bladders were free if you raised animals or cheap from the local butcher. The bladders provided privacy while allowing light. You could see shapes and shadows through them, but not details. Installation was simple. fitted into wooden frames and held in place with thin strips of wood or rope. While bladder windows solved the light problem, the walls themselves needed a different approach. Wattle and daub construction created walls from basically sticks and mud, but the engineering behind it was surprisingly sophisticated. Vertical wooden stakes were driven into the ground, then flexible wood strips were woven between them like basket weaving to create a strong foundation. It's like making a wall-sized basket, except instead of carrying fruit, it carries the weight of your roof. The daub wasn't just mud slapped on randomly. Medieval builders mixed clay, straw, animal dung, and sometimes horsehair into a specific consistency that would stick properly and dry hard. Animal dung contained fibers and binding agents that made the mixture stronger when dried. Plus, once it dried, the smell went away. The proportions had to be exact. Too much clay and it would crack as it dried. Too little and it wouldn't hold together during weather changes. The daub was applied in layers. First came a rough coat pressed into the wattle weave, then smoother finish coats that created the final wall surface. These walls provided excellent insulation and could be easily patched with local materials. But wattle and daub walls needed solid foundations to keep them dry. Rubble foundations were built by digging trenches and filling them with loose stones, whatever rocks were lying around or could be easily quarried nearby. This sounds careless, but medieval builders knew exactly what they were doing and understood soil mechanics. The key was drainage. Water sitting around foundations rots wood, dissolves mortar, and freezes to crack stone. Rubble foundations let water flow through and away instead of pooling up around the building where it could cause structural damage. These builders were essentially creating a giant French drain under their house, except they did it 500 years before anyone called it that. Larger stones went in first, creating big drainage channels that could handle heavy water flow. Smaller stones filled the gaps, but not completely. Air and water could still move through the foundation system. These foundations could flex and adjust as the ground moved through freeze-thaw cycles. Building required no special tools or imported materials. Every area had suitable stones. Some medieval buildings took advantage of natural landforms to stay comfortable. Earth-sheltered homes were built partially underground or carved directly into hillsides, taking advantage of the Earth's natural temperature control. 3 feet underground, soil maintains a nearly constant temperature year-round, cool in summer, warm in winter, without artificial climate control. Living underground might sound like hobbit life, but it was actually the medieval version of geothermal heating and cooling. The thermal mass of surrounding Earth absorbed heat during warm days and released it slowly during cool nights. This natural temperature buffering meant interiors stayed comfortable without burning fuel for heat or opening everything up for cooling breezes. Families needed much less firewood to stay warm, which was important when forests were being cleared for farmland. These homes were also storm-proof. Earth provided protection that no above-ground structure could match against severe weather. Many earth-sheltered homes were used for food storage as well as living space. The constant cool temperatures were perfect for keeping grain, vegetables, and preserved meats from spoiling. Whether above ground or below, every medieval home needed heating. Medieval homes originally had their fires burning right in the middle of the main room with no chimney at all. Sounds like a recipe for disaster, but it actually worked better than you'd expect, assuming you didn't mind smelling like a campfire permanently. The hearth sat in the center of the room on a stone platform. Smoke rose and spread across the ceiling before finding its way out through roof holes or wall gaps. Central heating was literal. The fire warmed the entire space evenly instead of creating zones. The smoke did something unexpected. It preserved the wooden roof beams. As smoke circulated around the timber, it deposited chemicals that acted as natural pesticides and preservatives. Roof beams often lasted centuries without rot or insect damage. Cooking was easier around a central fire too. Multiple people could work simultaneously, and large pots could be suspended from different angles. The central location made meal preparation a social activity. Getting in and out of these warm homes required special attention. Medieval doorways were often built wider on the inside than the outside, narrow where they met the exterior wall, then gradually widening toward the interior space. This unusual shape looked strange, but solved multiple problems at once with elegant engineering. It's like a funnel, except instead of pouring liquid, you're pouring people while keeping cold air out. This shape reduced drafts significantly. Cold outside air hitting the narrow exterior opening couldn't rush directly into the room, but had to navigate the angled passage. The tapered design also made doors easier to defend during attacks and was structurally stronger than straight-sided openings. Building tapered doorways required skilled stone cutting or careful timber framing. The angles had to be calculated precisely so doors would fit properly, and the passage would look proportional. Some included stone seats built into the thick walls. The technique worked with both stone and timber construction, showing the versatility of this design. Once inside, people walked on floors that were just as cleverly designed. Packed earth floors were created by compacting layers of soil, clay, lime, or ashes into a hard, smooth surface that could last decades with proper maintenance. This wasn't just dirt, it was engineered flooring made from carefully selected materials that performed better than many alternatives. Making a floor by stomping on dirt sounds like the world's most productive temper tantrum. Some floors were sealed with animal blood, which contained proteins that hardened as they dried, creating a natural waterproof coating that was surprisingly durable. Linseed oil was another common sealant that soaked into the compacted earth and hardened to create a cleanable surface. Repairs were simple and cheap. Worn areas could be dug up, new material added, and the section recompacted and sealed. No need to replace entire sections or match materials from distant suppliers. Everything needed was available locally. Different materials created floors with different properties: clay for hardness and water resistance, lime mixed with ash for lighter color and antibacterial effects. The techniques for joining wooden structures above these floors were equally ingenious. Oak peg construction used hardwood dowels to secure timber frame joints instead of metal nails or screws. These weren't random pieces of wood shoved into holes. They were precisely made fasteners that actually got stronger over time through natural wood movement. It's like medieval furniture assembly, except the wooden pegs actually worked and didn't strip out after 3 moves. When exposed to weather, the pegs would absorb moisture from rain and humidity, causing them to swell and grip the surrounding wood even tighter. During dry periods, they'd shrink slightly, allowing the timber frame to adjust and settle without creating stress cracks. The pegs were cut from seasoned oak heartwood, the densest and strongest part of the tree. They were shaped slightly larger than their holes, creating tight friction fits that held everything securely. The pegs were completely non-corrosive. Iron nails rust and expand, eventually splitting the wood they were supposed to hold together. Oak pegs could last as long as the surrounding timber without weakening joints. These sturdy structures needed protection from water. Medieval builders carved drainage channels directly into stone blocks or timber beams to control rainwater flow around their buildings. Water management wasn't an afterthought. It was designed into the structure from the very beginning of construction. They basically turned building construction into plumbing, except with hammers and chisels instead of pipe wrenches. Many gutters were integrated directly into architectural design rather than added later. Church builders carved elaborate gargoyles that served as decorative spouts, directing water away from walls while adding artistic flair. The gargoyles weren't just decoration, they were functional engineering disguised as art. Timber gutters were carved from single pieces of rot-resistant wood and sealed with pitch or tar for waterproofing. Ground-level drainage used sloped ground, trenches, and stone channels to direct water away from foundations. The systems worked with gravity and natural water flow rather than fighting against them, creating sustainable drainage that required minimal maintenance. The roof angles that fed these drainage systems were carefully calculated. Medieval roofs were built with steep pitches, usually 45 degrees or higher, that made them look dramatically different from the gentler slopes common on modern buildings. This wasn't just for appearance, it was serious weather engineering based on experience. It was like turning your roof into a water slide that rain couldn't resist using. The steep angle meant rain hit the roof and immediately started flowing downward instead of pooling or soaking into roofing materials. Water moved fast enough that it didn't have time to find small gaps or work its way through protective layers. Snow was even more important in northern European climates. Steep roofs shed snow loads quickly, preventing dangerous accumulations that could collapse the roof structure under excessive weight. Wind hitting a steep surface was deflected upward and over the building. The steep pitch also created more usable space under the roof for storage or sleeping areas. Different roofing materials worked better at different angles. Thatch needed very steep pitches, while tiles worked at moderate angles. Beneath these well-angled roofs, builders created perfect storage spaces. Barrel-vaulted cellars used curved, arched ceilings made from stone or brick that distributed structural weight evenly without needing any support beams. The arch shape was incredibly strong, much stronger than flat ceilings that required posts or beams. It's like building with stone building blocks, except if you mess up, you get buried instead of just frustrated. Stone or brick was laid over temporary wooden forms to create the perfect arch shape. Once the arch was complete and mortar had cured, the wooden forms were removed, leaving a completely self-supporting ceiling that could handle enormous weight loads. These cellars maintained remarkably stable temperatures year-round. The thick stone absorbed heat during warm periods and released it during cool periods, creating natural climate control that was perfect for storing wine, grain, and preserved foods. The arch design was also fire-resistant. Many medieval cellars survived fires that completely consumed the wooden structures above them, protecting valuable stored goods. While cellars stayed cool and dark, living spaces above needed help with lighting. Limewashed ceilings were painted white or light colors to reflect and amplify whatever light was available indoors. Before electric lighting, maximizing natural light was crucial for daily activities like cooking, sewing, reading, and any detailed work that required visibility. It was like installing medieval mirrors on your ceiling, except less creepy and more practical. Lime wash was made by mixing lime, calcium hydroxide, with water to create a thin, milky paint that dried to a bright finish. It dried to a bright white surface that reflected candlelight, firelight, and daylight much more effectively than raw surfaces. Lime was naturally antibacterial and antifungal, helping prevent mold and bacteria growth in damp indoor conditions. It also preserved wooden surfaces by creating an alkaline environment that discouraged insects and prevented rot from taking hold. Application required skill to get the right consistency, thin enough to spread smoothly, but thick enough for good coverage. Churches often decorated lime-wash surfaces with painted designs that showed up clearly. Some builders took an even more dramatic approach to wood preservation. Medieval builders discovered that deliberately charring the surface of wood made it last much longer and resist both water damage and insect attacks. This technique created a protective carbon layer that acted like natural armor for the wood underneath. It's like giving wood a deep tan, except with fire instead of sun, and it actually prevents damage instead of causing it. The process involved carefully controlled burning that charred only the outer surface while leaving the interior wood completely unaffected. Builders learned to recognize exactly when to stop the burning process. Too little charring provided minimal protection, too much weakened integrity. The charred surface was incredibly water resistant. Rain would hit the carbonized layer and run off instead of soaking into the wood grain where it could cause rot. Insects avoided charred wood because the carbon layer was difficult to chew through. The technique worked on both hardwood and softwood species, though different woods required different burning times and temperatures. While applying these techniques, builders also developed quality control systems. Medieval stonemasons carved personal symbols into the blocks they cut to track their work, ensure proper payment, and take pride in their craftsmanship. These marks served as both quality control and historical records that we can still read today on buildings. It was like medieval graffiti, except legal and actually useful. Each mason had a unique mark, usually a simple geometric symbol that could be carved quickly and recognized easily by contractors and fellow workers. The marks helped track work for payment when masons were paid by the piece rather than time. They also provided quality control. If a stone was poorly cut or failed later during construction, the mark identified who was responsible. This encouraged high standards since reputations were literally carved into the work for everyone to see. Different building projects sometimes had their own marking systems to help organize complex construction logistics. Many masons' marks from the 11th century onward are still visible on medieval buildings, providing direct connections. These skilled masons used surprisingly simple tools. Medieval builders accomplished precise geometric layouts using nothing more than ropes and wooden stakes, proving that advanced mathematics didn't require advanced tools. They mastered practical geometry that produced accurate results without written calculations or complex measuring instruments. It's like having a medieval protractor made of rope that actually worked better than most modern measuring tools. The foundation of their system was the 3-4-5 triangle method for creating perfect right angles. By measuring 3 units along one rope, 4 units along another, and 5 units for the diagonal, builders could create mathematically perfect corners. Proportional systems use simple ratios like 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 that could be measured easily with ropes. Circles and arcs were drawn using rope as a compass, one end fixed at center, the other marking circumference. Complex building layouts were developed by combining these simple techniques. Master builders passed down these geometric methods through practical training rather than written instruction. The precision achieved enabled buildings with excellent acoustic properties. Medieval church builders understood how sound behaved in large stone spaces and designed their buildings to enhance speech and music without any modern acoustic engineering knowledge. They learned through trial, error, and careful observation of how voices carried. They basically turned every church into a medieval sound system using nothing but rocks and geometry. Stone arches and curved ceilings naturally amplified and directed sound waves toward the congregation. The hard surfaces reflected sound rather than absorbing it, allowing voices to carry much farther than they would in spaces with soft materials. Pulpits were positioned at specific locations where the architecture would naturally amplify the speaker's voice. These optimal spots were discovered through experimentation, having people speak from different positions while others listened throughout the space. Some churches were designed so a whisper spoken at the altar could be clearly heard at the back wall. Different areas might have different acoustic properties. Choir areas enhance musical performance. These sophisticated buildings also needed protection from the elements outside. Tiled roof overhangs extended well beyond the building's walls, creating protective shields that kept rainwater away from foundations and structural elements. This wasn't just adding extra tiles randomly, it was calculated protection based on understanding how water behaves. It's like giving your house a really wide hat that actually keeps the rain off instead of just looking fashionable. The overhangs directed rainwater away from foundations where it could cause the most damage. Water falling directly against walls would soak into materials, freeze during winter, and gradually weaken the entire structure. With proper overhangs, rain landed safely away from vulnerable areas. These extended roofs also reduced erosion around the building's base. Without protection, constant dripping would create channels and holes in the ground, eventually undermining foundations. Windows and doorways received extra protection from direct rain too. The overhangs were often paired with carved wooden brackets or stone corbels for support. These weren't just functional, they became decorative elements that showed off the builder's skill while serving an essential structural purpose. Different regions developed their own overhang styles based on local weather patterns, but the principle remained the same: keep water away from damage. These medieval building techniques prove that innovation doesn't always require advanced technology. Sometimes it just requires careful observation and working with natural forces. Medieval builders created lasting solutions.